I'm breaking from tradition from how I usually do my rankings lists. We've gone from doing the whole thing in one video. So instead of doing the whole coverage in one video, which will take weeks of work and will affect how I'm treated in the algorithm, then I decided I'm going to break this down into smaller videos. I learned when I was doing the Pearl Harbor rankings, which were meant to come out in December 2021 and ended up coming out in February 2022 because of a 2-month delay. I really hate doing long videos, especially because now that everything's technically sort of back to normal, then I'm going to be working away from my desk a lot more. So when I'm doing a long video and I'm away helping on a production that can be as long as 3 days to several weeks, then doing a long video, it just takes a lot longer, doesn't it? And Titanic, from the name alone, is not a small thing. So yes, I am dividing the Titanic rankings into smaller videos. Till we get to the end, where I'll do one big compilation video, which will probably be about 3 hours long. It's better this way. No deadlines will be missed, and the videos will be coming out more regularly, so that'll be something to regularly come back to and look forward to, and I'll be doing other videos alongside those as well. Plus there's less of a risk of setbacks, because there's nothing more annoying than putting together a massive video that you put hours and hours into, and you've set a deadline for yourself, and then you sit there waiting for it to upload for hours and hours and hours, and then finally it says, we're going to copyright check that video, so it can't be monetized, or if we are going to monetize it, we're going to give the money to the copyright claimants, and you're not going to get anything. And I just think... That said, let's look at the Titanic on screen. I'm sure that you all have a version that you jump to as soon as the subject is brought up, and I've gone through the internet to find every single one that can possibly be found. So it can have a spot on this list, except for one thing, which again is that TV show Voyages. It's just not available in the UK, I'm sorry. I tried looking on Amazon Prime, we don't have it here. The why of Titanic being so popular has been covered over the last 110 years. But the fact that there were so many is a real eye-opener. The key factor to qualifying a place on this list is that it actually has to feature the sinking of the Titanic. Because after all these years, all the theories and the testimonies that have come and gone, changing our outlook on how the ship sank, we need to see that ship sink. You can't have Titanic without an iceberg, much like you can't have Dracula without a spooky castle, or you can't have Robin Hood without a bow and arrow. And because we're looking at so many different versions, this is also a sort of unofficial ranking of the famous people that were on the Titanic, like the most famous people, you know, the ones most of whom ended up in my 50 famous faces of Titanic video, you know, Captain Smith, Molly Brown, all the officers, Thomas Andrews, Bruce Ismay. I think there's another one in my head that I can't quite get. Oh, the wireless operating guys, that's it. Harold Bride and Jack Phillips. So anytime actual people who are on the Titanic appear in these TV shows and films and video games and stage productions, then I will talk about them and how well they were represented. And sometimes I just want to talk about how they were portrayed on screen, because there might have been a certain person who was depicted very insultingly just to push a narrative. I am looking at you, Julian Fellows. And then at the end, when I do my big conclusion, I'll just decide which ones were my favourite. But first off, before we get into the rankings proper, I want to talk about a few renditions that include the Titanic but don't count because we don't actually see the ship sink, or it's just barely mentioned. This exists, and I am not going to count it for the same reason I don't buy Nestlé products. It is not my desire to accommodate evil. The making of this movie is one of the reasons why Germany lost the Second World War. This film was created to promote the superiority of German filmmaking, while painting British shipmaking as incompetent. Bruce Ismay and Captain Smith, who are best known to be experts in their field, fairly harmless Protestant men, are now rewritten to be deliberately sinister Jews trying to push the Titanic to go faster to beat the speed record. And this is where the story that Ismay wanted the ship to go faster originated, along with the belief that he climbed into a lifeboat to save his own life without authorization, as opposed to likely just being ordered in because it was one of the last collapsibles. Ismay's actions in this film have been repeated throughout further adaptations, and some have been more sinister than others, as you'll come to see. They filmed this movie on the SS Cavalcade, which was sunk on the 3rd of May 1945, a few days before Germany surrendered. Unbeknownst to the RAF that sank the ship, it was full of Jewish prisoners. Production took up several resources. The original director was arrested and secretly executed. And after all that, it didn't premiere, although it was very popular in the Soviet Union. So yeah, I'm not talking about it again. Because I don't bloody want to. Saved from the Titanic was the first movie ever made about the Titanic sinking. It starred a survivor of the disaster, Dorothy Gibson. She, along with the other survivors, had just reached New York on the Carpathia when she was called home to Hollywood to star in a movie based on her experience. It was made and released within a month of the sinking. Gibson wore the same coat and dress she had worn on that night. Unfortunately, the film was lost in a fire in 1914. Gibson herself quit acting after this film, likely as a result of having to relive the trauma of that night. And let's be honest, it is in such poor taste to cash in on a disaster with such devastating loss of life, only weeks after the incident. Imagine if Remember Me came out in October 2001. Maybe Saved from the Titanic's destruction was for the best, although it does demonstrate just how quickly Titanic fell into the public consciousness.
It's getting colder, isn't it?
Well, that's to be expected in mid-ocean. We're near the banks of Newfoundland. Would you like to go in?
No, it's all right.
Cavalcade is a Noel Coward play about an upper-class family, the Marriotts, as they lived through the first 30 years of the 20th century. It was adapted into a beat-for-beat film in 1933. Noel Coward was a prolific writer, actor, singer and director, as well as a gay icon. If this has introduced someone to their works, which they'll no doubt love, I'll know I've done my job. On the night of 14th of April 1912, the eldest Marriott's son, Edward, has married his childhood sweetheart, Edith, and they're on their way to their honeymoon. In the play, Edith's cloak is hanging over the ship's rail, covering a life preserver. In the movie, she and Edward are simply standing in front of it. As they decide to turn in for the night, the background score seamlessly changes to Nearer My God to Thee, and the life preserver is revealed to be the RMS Titanic.
What a twist!
I think Noel Coward just rickrolled me with the Titanic. Edith and Edward don't make it out, as you learn in the next scene, which takes place 2 years later at the outbreak of World War I. You think Edith would have gotten on the boat, but during her scene with Edward, she voiced her openness in the face of death. We don't see the ship sink, but it was at least worth a mention. Alan is throwing in his own 2 cents here because he doesn't like this next movie. Then again, in order to raise a Titanic it involves a lot of water, and he is a cat. Yeah. Raise the Titanic is exactly what it says on the tin. They literally raise the Titanic from the ocean floor and take her to New York, where no doubt Taylor Swift is waiting there on the pier going, "Welcome to New York, it's been waiting for you." This is because there was something on the Titanic that the characters needed. It's important to the plot. I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. Alan, will you stop headbutting the microphone? Come on, baby. Obviously, this film and the preceding book was made before the wreck was discovered and found to have broken in half, because up until that point it was believed that the ship sank in one piece, and if they could only just find the wreck, they could bring her up to the surface and remodel her or something. But we know now that the current wreck is impossible to raise from the seabed. It took several attempts just to bring up a piece of the ship's hull. So yeah, the whole idea of raising the Titanic is now dated.
Excusez-moi, monsieur. Vous êtes français, n'est-ce pas? Excusez-moi. Je pars demain matin sur le Titanic. Je travaille comme femme de chambre. Je sais pas où passer la nuit.
The Chambermaid on the Titanic is a French language film released in the same year as the James Cameron film. A foundry worker named Horty wins a chance to see the Titanic launched at Southampton. I'm thinking it might be cheaper just to send him to Cherbourg. Then again, we're seeing the launch of the Titanic. Anyway, when he's there, he lets a maid who is going to be working on the ship stay in his hotel room the night before the launch. When he gets home, he makes up a complicated narrative about what happened between them. It's not confirmed if he actually slept with her though. They were going to call it masculinité toxique, but I think that would have been too obvious.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Christmas.
Well, I have to mention one of the better Doctor Who Christmas specials, don't I? The ones in the David Tennant era were really, really good, but with Matt Smith onwards, they just got more and more boring. They were just things that, we have to watch it, because why not? Because we watched Muppet Christmas Carol the night before, and Sound of Music's not on yet. I remember this one having a massive teaser at the end of season 3. There was this massive anticipation for what was going to happen, and everyone thought, oh my god, what if the TARDIS was the iceberg all along? So come Christmas Day, we the audience are just as confused as the Doctor, until he realises this Titanic isn't the actual Titanic, it's a spaceship made to look like the Titanic, providing a pleasure cruise on Christmas Eve of 2008. The ship is meant to look like the Titanic because the cruise presents planet Earth as a commodity and the passengers are living as if they are Earthlings. And because the Titanic is a famous ship on Earth, that's what they named their spaceship after. Obviously, no one knew why it was famous. Like the ship it was named after, it meets a tragic fate. Oh, and Kylie Minogue is in it. That's very important.
Mr. Capricorn! I resign.
I've booked us all on the maiden voyage of the largest, most luxurious space cruise ship ever built, the Titanic.
Looks nice.
This is one of my favourite Futurama episodes. Like in Doctor Who, this Titanic is a spaceship designed as a pleasure cruise. The Planet Express team are on a company vacation, and the main story is a parody of the James Cameron movie, with Bender falling in love with an elegant upper-class robot. Meanwhile, Fry has to pretend to be both Leela and Amy's boyfriends.
I learned how to handle delicate social situations from a little show called Three's Company.
Rather than hit an iceberg, Zap Brannigan steers the ship towards a black hole because he's an idiot, and then he absconds, leaving Kif in charge. The Planet Express crew escapes, but Bender's lover doesn't. At least he got to keep her bracelet.
What do you think it's worth?
It's fake, mon. But I could never have done it without Dr. Watson. Let Watson's name be forever associated with the Titanic. So when you think of your friends and relatives on board the Titanic, just remember Dr. John H. Watson.
This movie sucks. I'm not going to watch it. You can't make me. You would think a movie that pairs together Wreck-It Ralph with Megamind would be a really good movie. But it's not.
I'm bad, and that's good. I will never be good, and that's not bad. There's no one I'd rather be than me.
This movie isn't exactly a sequel to James Cameron's movie. Instead, this is a mockbuster, specifically made by a mockbuster factory, the Asylum, to make you think that it's a sequel. A replica of the Titanic is built on the 100th anniversary and travels from New York to Southampton, but once again, the ship hits an iceberg and it sinks. Funnily enough, there is supposed to be a Titanic II in the works, and it was meant to be completed in 2022. But if it's ever finished, I don't think it's going to be affordable for the likes of us. You can just picture people buying their way on board, posting selfies and pretending it's all so romantic when people bloody died. Honestly, it sounds like such a dumb gimmick that disrespects the people who died. If you make it a museum that anyone can visit, that's something. But with some vacation experiences being so ridiculously expensive that only the super rich could afford them, it just makes you want to scream.
It's only normal. There are sharks, Smile. We're at sea. This is their home. Honestly, there really isn't anything to worry about.
There are 3 animated Titanic movies. 2 qualify for the rankings because they feature the sinking. This one, probably the worst of the 3, doesn't, because it's a sequel to Legend of the Titanic. Oh, the Titanic is in it. After the King of Atlantis has put it back together, gutted it, and had the space where the engines and boilers and cargo hold would be replaced with a massive ballroom. It is then taken to the surface by a giant fucking manta ray. Manta rays don't even live in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They prefer shallower, warmer waters. There is a whole load of other crap in this movie, but for the sake of my own mental health, I will leave it for someone else to eviscerate.
The Titanic.
Oh, yeah, the Titanic, yes. Well, it was meant to sink, and I saved it.
Why?
Why what?
Why did you unsink the ship?
Oh, because I hated the movie.
What movie?
Exactly.
I've never seen Supernatural before. I don't know the jokes about pie, or which Winchester brother is which, or if the blonde one and the angel in the trench coat are really a couple. I remember a lot of discourse about queerbaiting after the show ended. But I thought I'd watch this episode, just in case it ended up with the brothers actually on the Titanic. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Instead, this episode is like Final Destination with more gore. You see, Balthazar, a sexy British angel, goes back in time and stops the Titanic from sinking by spotting the iceberg just in the nick of time. By the present day, 50,000 people are alive that shouldn't have been, because 1,500 people didn't die that night. They went on to have children and grandchildren. And Trenchcoat Angel, not to be confused with Leather Jacket Angel, has more souls for a civil war in heaven. A sister of fate, dressed like a librarian, but not Dean's idea of a librarian, starts killing off these people one by one to make sure things should be the way they were. If you're a Titanic nerd like me, you get to see little Easter eggs in the background, where in this timeline where the Titanic never sank, you see a travel agency that one of the people that dies works at is called E.J. Smith. The Winchester brothers are staying in the White Star Hotel, and the website Sam uses to research the Titanic is named Marconi. Unfortunately, we don't see the actual ship. In order to stop fate from killing the Winchester brothers, everything has to go back to normal.
I so hoped that our ship would be a symbol of what might have been achieved. A unifying force. That was my vision.
After having to watch The Winds of War, which took years of my life, I was worried about having to watch another long series just to watch a small glimpse of a disaster that I'm covering. Thankfully, this was not the case, so I didn't have to watch it. It's based on what was happening when the Titanic was being built, and it ends when the Titanic sets off on her maiden voyage. But their Titanic doesn't sink, so I don't have to watch it, and I've saved myself 12 hours. Okay, so that's all the movies and TV shows and such that feature Titanic but don't actually feature the sinking, apart from the one that was made by Nazis, but we're not including that because we have integrity over here. Before you ask about Holmes and Watson, I have the right to disqualify it if I don't want to include it. At least the rapping dog and the North Korean octopus kept the iceberg. It is a fact universally acknowledged that you can't have Titanic without an iceberg. Anyway, the next video in our series will look at the very first, or rather the bottom of the list when it comes to the rankings. I will do a little list at the end of each one so you can keep track as to which ones I've covered, which ones I haven't done yet, and which I will be teasing next. I've decided to do this thing at the end of each video where I will do a little teasing image, and I'll put it right here, and it will be what I'm going to cover next, and you can have fun guessing until I release the next video. The bright side to starting at the bottom of the heap is at least the only way to go is up. Until then, if you like the video, please make sure you share it around. And by subscribing, you can join me and Alan on this voyage of terror and mediocrity and emotional pain. You can help support the channel by becoming a patron. So what you can do is you can sign up for as low as $1.50 or £1 per creation, and then you can get your name in the credits, such as these lovely people, and of course King and Queen patrons who are the top tier get a shout out in the credits. So to Anastasia Gracia, Alison Cuff, Larissa, Leslie Williams and Lady Eternal, thank you guys so much. Of course, because these are individual videos, I'm not going to be charging my patrons for individual Titanic ranking videos, but when I put all of this into a giant compilation, then I will charge you for the big compilation instead. So I'll see you next time. Bye.